Here we go.
So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another webinar from the SCMA Conference 2020. Thank you for sticking with us. I know sometimes it's hard to stick in after the lunch break, so we greatly appreciate it. And I think you're all going to enjoy this particular topic. It's about online mediation. And as I was sharing with my colleagues, I believe it's something that's here to stay. So it's excellent that you're joining us for this part of the conference, because I believe you're going to learn quite a bit. So I have the pleasure of introducing two of my colleagues. They're both board members with the SCMA, as I am. For some of you, you're wondering maybe my background. I'm a probate and family law mediator in one of the courts in Southern California. And each of our board members has very unique qualifications that will be brought to the table with regards to online mediation. I'm going to start off first with Debra Dupree. When we met, I was very excited because she did not have necessarily a legal background, as I've met with most SCMA members, but actually from the mental health world, which I find wonderful, because those of you who are possibly in mental health or in contact with anyone in the health community will probably notice that mediation is an excellent tool to try to help parties or clients understand one another's viewpoint. So let me give you a little background on Debra. She's a renowned mediator, and she has been one in both the speaking and training arena for over 30 years. So we're really lucky to have her speaking with us today. In addition, she's the director of the Training for Mediation Institute. She designed and delivered training with MTI. Founder Dan Dana, and she's also somebody who's quite an advocate in training attorneys. For those of you who are attorneys, sometimes it's a challenge to be a mediator because you're trained in more litigation and looking at things from a single perspective. So it sounds like Debra is helping you to look at things from two perspectives in the way that mediators are trained to do. She's a psychologist. She's down in San Diego, and she trained as a coach with an organization called Synergy. She's actively trying to acquire skills to mentor other people, including the Department of the Navy and their ADR program for the last 20 years. Wow, Debra, you have been a busy bee. In addition, she has extensive experience in mediating family and workplace issues, specializing in high conflict relationships and interactive processes for medical conditions in the workplace. Finally, she gives back by teaching at the California Western School of Law, I believe located in San Diego, as well as at National University, their certificate in conflict resolution, as well as, I believe I'm pronouncing this right, Ryokan College in advanced psychology and the neuroscience of behavior. She is as well a regular speaker at the professional conferences, sharing the psychology behind human behavior in conflict. So please welcome Debra Dupree. And then I also have a little information regarding Susan Guthrie. I'm sure many of you, if you haven't noticed, she really promotes online mediation. I've been fortunate enough to take a couple of classes. And for those of us who are not very technical savvy, she helps to break that down into understandable chunks. And I'm very appreciative of that. As I mentioned, I do believe that online mediation is here to stay. And of course, she will address that issue. She's also known as a top family law and mediation attorney, and working also in mediation in that listeners in over 80 countries around the world. And as a leading dispute professional, Susan is honored to serve on the Executive Council of the American Bar Association, as well as the Dispute Resolution as the Membership Officer and co-chair of the Mediation Committee. She is a licensed to practice in California and Connecticut. And so I'm honored to introduce Debra Dupree and Susan Guthrie talking to you on the art of online mediation. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Lucia. It's an honor to be here, and we appreciate the opportunity to present some of the findings that have stimulated our inquiry into what are people learning and what do people need to learn. And so I'm honored to be here with Susan, who we know is the online mediation specialist, and certainly proud to be recently selected to be on the SCMA board. So welcome all of our participants, and I will just put out, thank you for your inquiry. This is a webinar format, so unfortunately we cannot put all the participants up on the screen, but we will be asking that you actively participate in the chat room. We have a number of polling questions. And so one of the first things I'll let you know, while we have had over 90 participants respond to our survey in progress since about midsummer, you're going to have an opportunity to contribute your thoughts and experiences right here today. Okay, so we look forward to hearing what you have to say, but let me tell you a little bit about what we plan to do today. So first of all, it really is about what do dispute resolution professionals really think about online mediation. And how this got started was that, I just met with Harold Coleman back in February. We've mapped out a whole series of in-person trainings throughout 2021 and including 2020. And then lo and behold, as we all know, COVID-19 hit. And we had a conversation a week or so later, and it's like, what the heck are we going to do now? Our whole life mapped out just went away. And I've already been doing a fair amount of online stuff myself and started teaching in 2007 in a webinar format for a national university. So I was pretty experienced with it, but and had done some mediation. But then as I started talking to Harold about it, I thought, well, we could shift to online, and so that opened up a whole new world for him and AAA. And then as we started talking about, well, what are we going to teach? I mean, we've got existing programs, but maybe there are other things that people need to know. And so at that point, I was collaborating with Harold and Susan and another colleague, Mark Lassiter from Arizona, sometimes Colorado. And I said, why don't we do a survey? Because I think I know what attorneys, particularly, and mediators need to know coming from a behavioral scientist perspective, but I don't want to presume I know everything, and I don't. So that's what really launched this whole project. And so we've been, steadily collecting responses at different venues, and certainly we thought, well, why not do it here today and let people know what have we learned, since March, as we all had to quickly pivot, and where do we need to go? So you're going to have an opportunity to provide some input and what kinds of skills and trainings do you feel you need in order to continue to move forward. And so you will learn from others, both from the survey as well as those of you here online. And also, this is an opportunity to speak your voice. As I mentioned, you're going to be invited to provide your responses to a series of polling questions, so be ready. Don't try to multitask, your attention is required at all times. And we'll see instant election results. No delaying a week here, okay? We're on top of this one. And then also, taking a look at just where have we come, what are we still learning? I know I just got some great ideas in Wendy Kramer's presentation that I had a chance to participate in for most of the time. But how do we take our virtual practices to the next level? As Lucia said, this isn't going to go away. And quite frankly, as Colin Rule would say, he's been predicting for quite a long time about ODR, okay? I've known that since the mid-2000s when I was on the ACR workplace section, and ODR, Colin was actively advocating ODR way back when, 15 years and more before our time. And so we're just all catching up, okay? So here we go. What's next? And so we, go ahead.
Go ahead, Debra. Well, I was just going to say, so that was the genesis of the survey. So we're going to sort of, the way we set the presentation up is we're going to go through each question of the survey, launch the poll for all of you so you can take the actual survey as we're doing it, and then we'll reveal both the prior participants' information as well as your results and then also just talk about it, because I will tell you, even as someone who's so immersed in online mediation, and Debra, who is so skilled at it and has been doing it herself for a number of years, some of the responses surprised us, and there is information, I think, that we all can carry forth and things to think about as well. And we'd love your input beyond just the polling questions. So again, I will reiterate, we really would love you to put information into the chat, questions, thoughts, etc. So that first question, has technology affected your skill set as a mediator? So let me get that first polling question launched for you all.
And so you can sort of respond to this on the continuum, with 0 not at all to 10 being absolutely. And so let's see what you have to say.
Yeah, this was interesting to me because, and as we thought about it, we're thinking maybe the question, should it be in a positive fashion? I know some mediators who feel that technology has affected their skill set, but not in a positive way, because they get so focused on the technology of trying to do a mediation online that they actually feel the technology has been difficult for them to continue their skill set. So it could be in either direction, right? Has it helped, or has it not helped? Has it been a detriment?
Okay, we have about 73% of the population voting. Let's not take as long as the rest of the country has.
Yeah, there we go. So so it looks like we are at moderately number 5. We went right down the middle of the line there, people, for the most part. But I think we have more people saying on the top end than the bottom end. I'm looking at the percentages. Yeah.
Okay.
Take that down.
So what did our survey population of about 90 participants say so far? About almost 70% of the people said that they were significantly impacted. Now, we do have comments and stuff like that. We're not going to go into all of those things today, but do want to hear in the chat box, because we will be capturing this in our recording. Just give us some more ideas about how you've been impacted, because I anticipate we'll be doing more with some of those kinds of results as well.
Yeah, and I would love to know what people's thoughts are on has the technology. For those of you who had lower numbers, is it that you think that it hasn't really had much impact at all because you haven't gone online, or has it been a detriment? Because I know there are many practitioners that feel that it is.
So secondly, we were curious on what kind of mediator are you? What is your primary area of practice? And so here's where your next polling question comes into play. And I believe you do have the opportunity to check more than one, I think. But are you employment? Are you family? Are you civil, commercial, whatever?
Here come my family people. We're getting some answers here. So this is interesting. Definitely a lot of my family brethren out there. Mm-hmm. You too, Debra. Debra does family, employment, workplace. All right, so we have about 45% of you. See if we can get it to 50% and I'll close it out. One more person answer. There we go, over 51.
I did a ways back, so I forgot.
Okay, so that gives us results. We have mostly employment, family, commercial, and other.
So what did our population show? Interestingly, and we actually did the survey across a number of venues, certainly from my free webinars, out through SCMA. I know, Susan, you put that out quite a bit to your ABA groups and so forth. And so whenever I've spoken at something, I've asked attorney and mediators to comment. But you can see that civil mediators were actually our largest population in the survey, but we actually had none today in our program, followed by commercial, and then family, and then employment. And that's sort of consistent with what we're seeing here today. And so again, if you do a different type of mediation, actually I see quite a few of you, 30%, do other types of mediation. So I'd love to hear from you in the chat box, what kinds of mediations you do, so that we get a feel for just the spectrum of the application of mediation across all fields. I know when I actively taught mediation back in the early 2000s, you know, I walked away with, gosh, you could be a mediator from almost any kind of field, because I met people who specialize in antiquities, you know, another in heirlooms, you know, and so it's just really, really interesting, you know. So yeah, so moving on.
Well, one note on that last slide I just wanted to mention is that I'm wondering, because we're going to relaunch this this poll in the coming year as well. And one of the things that I'm interested to see will be if we see a rise in employment, family, perhaps landlord tenant in certain areas that are COVID related, where we're starting to see, if not more litigation, more cases because of COVID related issues. So I have already anecdotally been hearing that we're seeing a rise in those. Actually, in one of my ABA meetings yesterday, we were talking about starting bankruptcy programs through some of the universities' bankruptcy mediation programs around the country, and finding out if people were doing them. So I do think we're going to see a rise in some of these areas as well. Small claims, landlord tenant, absolutely, Martha, I agree with you. And family law, certainly, I think we've already seen it. My practice when I was doing more mediation, went from actual divorces to being more of the post-dissolution, like changing parenting plans, modifying child support and alimony because people had lost jobs. So I do think we're going to start to see a rise actually for all of us in all fields, but I wonder if it will be concentrated in some of these COVID areas.
And I'd like to add to that, Susan, because two things is that one, I've long specialized in the interactive process for employees with medical conditions. But let me tell you, I've been very busy. You know, I work a lot with school districts. I've been very busy this fall and continue to be addressing underlying conditions for COVID-19 and what prevents people from coming back to work, or even when, you know, school districts have been taking extreme precautions and developing safety protocols and things like that. And so it's been an interesting time. I think the other thing behind this particular question for us today to you is that, does online mediation actually create the opportunity for you to actually add maybe some other dimensions of mediation to your practice that may not have been so readily available geographically? And so I know I've had a much greater opportunity to, you know, reach further. And I know I've shared with Susan already that I actually taught a program at the Hong Kong Institute of Mediation in August, and I'm slated for some more in November, December, and into 2021. I would never have done that before, but, you know, paths crossed ways, and now I'm doing teaching in Hong Kong. So the world is interesting.
Well, and that's a good point, Debra, and it's something I actually talk about in my online mediation training program for professionals, because you just mentioned you're not mediating in Hong Kong, but you are training in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And that is something that moving into an online platform does give us an opportunity to consider. Are there other ways that we can put services out there in the world and take our knowledge and expertise and skill set as mediators, as peacemakers, and provide other types of services? So, you know, like Debra, I've been doing training and do that around the world, but I also am brought in as an expert in some litigation cases now around the world and around the country. And I've been doing consulting work with colleagues and professionals. So that's another thing for, I think, that all of us to think about, is we're no longer as boxed in, because we now have this geographic availability of a wide set of clients who we can offer maybe different services to.
It's sort of fun having conversations with people all over the world.
The time zone differences are not always fun.
No, I do have to work at 6 o'clock in the night, so it's midday the next day. So yeah, and I know somebody else who had been up at 4 o'clock trying to teach across the world. So yeah. So the next question is about, how long have you been mediating? And Susan and I already have some, you know, questions for you, because we're sort of, this is interesting. What does this really mean?
Yeah, I will tell you, this was one of the areas where I was surprised with the results that we got from our sample selection of prior participants. Let's see here. Yep. So here I'll end. Well, we've got, we're at about 60, 70% here. So I'm going to end the polling and share our results.
Okay.
So 5 years or less and 6 to 10 years were the two areas of largest concentration, 29% each. And then we do have a good sample though of 13% each at 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and then greater than 25. And then our results, oops, let me just close that. So in the original polling sample, it was mostly, as you can see, less than 5 years. And then the next largest group was the 6 to 10 years. And I've just, having worked in several organizations that are dispute resolution centered, I know that many of our members are members who have had practices either in the law or mental health fields, sometimes financial fields, who then move into a dispute resolution practice as an adjunct or as a second or later career. So I found it very interesting that we were seeing at least responses coming in from people who have been mediating for a less number of years there. And one of the things that we, Debra and I noted, is it just that more experienced mediators are not answering the poll? Is that possible, that we're just not getting a sample that's giving us that information? Or is it that people are now starting to move into the dispute resolution field, and we have younger or newer practitioners? And that is something that I expect we will start to see if that's not what this means, because again, I think there's going to be an explosion of dispute resolution, the need for dispute resolution as we continue to move through COVID and well beyond it, because of the situation that's accruing and has accrued in the court system. I also think the fact that people who might not have gone for dispute resolution in the prior COVID time period, but who have now accessed it because it was available and they couldn't get into the court, they're going to start and see the benefits. And so people who would never have tried it or were reluctant to try it, but will also start moving into the field. So I think we are going to, and I'm already seeing it in my role with the ABA, that we are getting in the past 5 months or so, a large number of new practitioners or people who have practiced in other areas who are transitioning to dispute resolution careers.
Yeah, and I think, and that's a shift we've seen, because again, when I was teaching actively back in 2000, 2005, about a third of our population would be attorneys. And I'd oftentimes ask them, what's the deal? And they were just tired of litigation. And so, and I know that that's been supported by my engagement with lawyers over the years as far as why we've shifted. And that's certainly evident in my Agile Lawyer interview series I've been doing, the results of which will be published in 2021, that's often been the motivator. Just got tired of the fight, and that there's got to be a better, calmer way of resolving differences. And but I think that, like you say, Susan, a younger population is being drawn to it. And I think that's a reflection of world events too, is that, maybe there are other alternative ways of dealing with people in conflict than going the traditional litigation route. So I was talking about, it's a continuum. There's several different options, but for too long, this country's really been focused on the litigation piece of that. And that's not shared worldwide. Other countries put mediation first and foremost before litigation is an option. So
in Australia, you go to mediation first. No one thinks about going to litigation. So yeah, we are the complete opposite of Australia.
Australia's been PDR, primary dispute resolution, since about 2004 or 5. Yeah, Hong Kong's that way too, by the way. So, yep. Okay, next question is, how many mediations have that's surprising. I just had somebody for the first one. So what's our question?
How many online mediations have you facilitated via online video conferencing? Now, I will tell you, this was the one that surprised me the most, I think, out of all of the questions that we got. The answers, okay, so we're tracking on the answers that we got in the polling sample. So I'm going to, let's see how many we've gotten to. Yeah, we've got 27 of you have answered. So let's end the polling, and I'm going to share the results for you all there. So Of the people who attended, as well as the prior sample, less than 10 online mediations. And I just, that was interesting to me, because depending on whether you were operating a full-time practice, even if you shifted to online mediation at the beginning of COVID at 7 months, that would mean that people have only had the opportunity to go online for less than 10. And I know that the more we do something, the more we feel comfortable with it. So I've been wondering that the fact that the opportunity has not been a large number of online mediations, if that's what's also leading to some people still being a little uncomfortable with the platform or with the format. Because people that I talk to anecdotally, I have a few people that I have talked to who took my program back March and April, and some of them have done well over 100 mediations in the last 7 months. So I'm sure that's partially, what types of mediations you are handling. But for some reason, under 10 surprised me.
Yeah. Likewise. Again, in my disability area, I probably do anywhere from 2 to 5 a week, so I've got a lot underneath my belt. So, yeah. And so again, as we see, how can we increase that? And so part of that may be educating the legal market, but also educating the communities that we surround us. So number 5, which of the following are preferred devices? So we're glad to see, at least in our poll so far, some devices not selected, and then it's not surprising what are selected. So our next polling question.
There we go.
So we have desktop computer, personal digital assistant, enterprise digital assistant, table or tablet pad, laptop, smartphone, and other.
I will say I'm happy that I'm not seeing people choose personal digital assistant. I said to Debra, I didn't even think that those existed anymore. I wasn't quite sure how that made it into our survey. But so laptop computer does, and desktop computer, again, you are all tracking very closely what we saw from the prior participants. And just as a practitioner and someone who's very dedicated to online mediation, I'm happy to see these results because for the most part, I have found, and most participants have found, that the process just works better, especially if you're using Zoom or the platform you're using. Most of them function better, and the functionality of being able to do things like share screen, et cetera, is much easier from a laptop or desktop. Now, the question we couldn't ask, because we're polling mediators here, but I think the other interesting question, and something that we all need to sort of think about, is what devices are our participants using to participate in the mediation? Because by and large, again, most of the people that I talk to, depending on what type of mediations they're doing, but a lot of people who are doing community mediations or courtside mediations have people on their cell phone, on a small screen, which has limited capabilities at times, or on an iPad, which again, doesn't have functionality like breakout rooms and all that. So it is something for us as practitioners to be thinking about with our participants, is letting them know why it works better from a laptop or desktop or other device rather than using their phone, if that's a possibility. I understand that it's not always, but I do think that we as practitioners have realized that and are using our computers. I don't know that our participants know that, and if we're telling them that.
Yeah, and so that's something I know from talking to Susan a lot about this, is that there's, when you're talking about Zoom or other online platforms for doing mediation, is that certain features aren't available on your smartphones, that was your mode of doing that as a mediator. And so something to keep in mind there as well. So, okay. So next is we want to take a look at which video platform do you, sorry, I pulled up that too fast, I apologize. Which video platform do you prefer for online work? And so again, we've got WebEx, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Adobe, Legaler, Modrin, pre-conference call. Whoa, okay.
The numbers are racking up for Zoom.
Yeah, and I already showed you the results too. So
Yeah, there should be no surprise here. It's like I'll end we're up to 28 of participants, 82% of you. Let's share the results. 100% of you all are using Zoom, and I don't think that there's any surprise with that. One of the things that dawns on me is most of the people that I trained on using Zoom, and I trained them how to use Zoom to do mediations. So I shouldn't be surprised when that's what people are using. And in fact, it's what I've used for the 5 years I've been doing online. I will say, one thing to just be aware of, Zoom does actually have some new functionality in the pipeline that is going to make our lives easier. They are going to be doing immersive, let me just share this. Sorry, I thought I was sharing it. They're going to be doing immersive backgrounds. So essentially you can you'll be able to make the screen look like your conference room or look like a living room setting where people can be sitting on couches. They have a few of them on display. There's a classroom and a courtroom that are on. So for arbitrators, the courtroom or that more formalized setting will be interesting. They're adding the ability to see people's video in the waiting room so you can visually confirm who's there. They will not be able to see you, but the host will be able to see them. Debra, I know, wants the ability to play music in the waiting room. So that is not in the pipeline, but they have upgraded the audio system, the standard audio system that Zoom is using to upgrade the audio that we hear. And, as Debra has taught me, hearing the inflection in people's voices is actually a very important part of communication. I think it's about 35% of our communication, higher than that. Okay,
38.
to Debra. 38% comes through hearing the tone, the inflection in people's voices. One of the things somebody mentioned earlier about people using a iPhone or a smartphone for the doing mediations. One of the reasons it can just make life a little bit harder is because it has such a small screen. The thumbnails, the video thumbnails are very small. And if it's 38%, that's the inflection in our tone, it's 55-ish%, correct me where I'm wrong, but that is your facial expression. And I got one right. So your people's facial expressions are also that important. So I think you can just realize if someone's a little itty bitty thumbnail on a phone, as opposed to a thumbnail on a laptop or a desktop, that just can have something to do with people's perception or understanding of communication. The only other thing that I will mention with Legaler and Modron that are on here is those are two platforms that were created actually in Australia. Debra and I were just talking about how forward they are ahead of us in mediation. They were both created 7 to 10 years ago, depending on which one you're talking about, in Australia. And they are ODR platforms for ODR professionals and legal professionals. So they were built from the ground up with security and privacy at the forefront, not like Zoom, which wasn't necessarily built with that. So they've been adding it in and done a good job, but different paradigm there between adding it to the platform or having it be a central part of its construction. And they also have some functionality that's really nice. Modron and Legaler are both adding e-signatures. They're both adding PayPal integrations and others like Stripe and Plaid. So you'll be able to have those functionalities right within there. So there's some reasons perhaps to consider them. You can also white label them. Wendy, I saw that you had a question about the immersive backgrounds, eliminate the effect where if you move body parts disappear. Yes, so they are actually immersive backgrounds. They're almost like a picture in the meeting that then people's outline of their figure, much like mine is an outline with my background, will be set into that thumbnail. So you may still get some of the shimmer, but it is much reduced because the immersive background is almost like a slide like this. Go ahead, Debra.
Yeah, so I'm glad you addressed that because I saw Wendy's comment too, but I also want to address Phil's question. And also want to comment on why I want music in the waiting room, okay? Because music, the right kind of music, soothing, softening, something like that, actually does affect our brain neurology. And so it can actually open up our brain synapses so that we're more open and receptive to new information that we might be hearing. So it's called vibrational intelligence for just so you know, and a lot's been done by the work of Gary Malkin, who is actually a 5-time Emmy Award winner for music composed for films and movies. He was on my podcast back in August, if you want to check it out. But I want to address Phil's comment about WebEx. WebEx has done an excellent job working in the corporate market as far as a secure online platform, and they've been around a long time, and they really have a lot of great features. As a professional trainer, having used WebEx, I hear this comment from a lot of people. It's a bit of it can be clunky. It's not as easy as Zoom is. And so certainly viable. And I understand, a lot of companies have protocols against Zoom. They don't feel that they can protect the security and confidentiality as much. But I have just found, well, it's very costly. Again, they've catered to the corporate market. And so Zoom is just much more accessible and easy to use without all kinds of protocols ahead of time. I know that somebody had a hand up, and I'm not sure who it is. So Doug, was that you or?
Well, we're figuring that out. I just wanted to mention to Phil, because he said that many insurance adjusters cannot use Zoom. That is something definitely that we've been seeing. And so we do encourage having a secondary platform. I would encourage you to go look at maybe Legaler, Modron, or there's RDO, Resolve Disputes Online. I put Legaler right now is running a free year membership for professionals using the code remote-19. So if you just want to go try another platform, that's a very robust trial period. And I don't have anything to do with Legaler. I just know it's a free year and it's worth trying. I like their platform. So that may be another avenue to look at, rather than something like WebEx, which can be pricey and clunky.
Yeah, and I know Doug there, thank you for putting your question into the chat room. He's been using Microsoft Teams and finds it works very well too. And I've had limited exposure just because a couple of clients have wanted to use it, but I'm much more familiar with Zoom. So that's another option, Microsoft Teams, and that's come out pretty recent with their newer version of Office Outlook. Blue Jeans is another one, yeah. So
They
yeah,
just got bought out, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi,
So
Jean.
I'm sorry, going on to our next
sorry.
question. Whoops, what happened?
Lost our screen.
Did you lose it?
I didn't. It's showing your screen.
Okay. There we go. Let me go back. Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah, 7.
Okay, yeah. 7. Thank you.
Right.
I'm not sure what happened. It just suddenly exploded on me. So what contributes to the success of in-person mediation, being able to see people live? And I know Wendy talked about
back
this
in the old days, these days.
Yeah, when we could actually get together,
Yeah, when we were all in that same room. It seems like such a long time ago. It's funny on my phone today, you know how the phone will pop up where you were a year ago, and all my SCMA conference pictures were popping up, sitting with you, Debra, doing a panel last year. So
there we go.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one to me, and I think at different times, probably all of these are of impact on an in-person. Let me just see. So we're up to about 52%. A couple more people, if you wouldn't mind answering, and then we'll be over the threshold there.
We don't want to discount any of your votes.
Yes. All votes count. All
yes,
right.
all votes count. Yep.
All right.
All those polls mean a voter.
All right. So looks like the winner would be ability to create rapport, right in your wheelhouse there, Debra. And then we also have as another high ease of in-person communication and ability to sense the emotion and tension of the parties. So all feeling like those are essentially, to me, emotional context. Well, ease of in-person communication could be, I just think it's easy to see when you can see people. but let's look at, I took away ours. Ability to sense the emotions of the participants and ability to create rapport were the two largest ones. You guys are tracking very, very consistently along with our prior poll.
And if I can put a plug to Wendy, because I know Wendy is on this program, is that, she had a great program just before us regarding the New World of Mask, or whatever she called it. And I learned a lot, and I study body language and the impact of mask all the time. And so she had some really valuable information and a lot of good tips. So do take advantage of her recording as part of the SCMA conference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I've always found that these responses have surprised me too, because for me, and maybe it's because I have that behavioral science background, but it's like transition wasn't hard for me, and a lot of the things I do in person, I still do on screen, and so this is where learning some of the facial expressions and body movements will really help you in being able to sense where the person's coming from. And being able to read emotion, but you have to up your game, so to speak. And I know Wendy shared a really great story from an international colleague about how she's really learned, where it's sort of common that people will wear facial coverings anyway, but being able to really, read the eyes and the forehead, and being able to interpret that appropriately. So these are areas where it's important that we all advance our skills on, because as we've said, the online world is not going to go away. And I know I advocated yesterday in my webinar, and you'll see more of this coming from me, the importance of doing pre-mediation as far as building rapport and building connection, and how you can start shaping mindsets before you even get to the mediation. I also want to share with you, I've heard these comments a lot from people over the last few weeks in different presentations, that many people feel that they're able to view body language even more so on the screen because everybody's right in front of you now. But if you're in a mediation, let's say you have more of a longer table to accommodate all the parties, you may not see what's going down further down the table and miss a lot of shifts in body language. And so there are actually some benefits that mediators are reporting to us. So Susan, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share results on this one.
Okay.
Okay, great. And then moving on to our next question. What gets in the way of reaching resolution via in-person mediation? And I thought that this was an interesting response as well. So our next polling question, let's see what you have to think, what gets in the way, and see how it matches our respondents so far.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to, we've had that, so we had an issue with our polling in the last presentation, and unfortunately it just started again in this one. So let me just try to close that poll again. And okay, here we go. All right.
This is number 7. So now we need to go to the next one, number 8. Oh, wait a minute.
It should be showing.
Oh, okay. Okay, there we go. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry.
So inability to manage emotions, entrenched positions, advocates unhelpful to the process, dispute not ready for resolution, necessary parties not present, lack of pre-mediation preparation, and then of course other. And put your other in the chat room so we know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
See, we should be playing music during these silences.
Right.
Susan.
It keeps us all thinking. Debra always has a good reason for what she wants to do. I thought she just wanted it to be like an elevator with music, as we were waiting, but she had a very good reason why she wanted to do it. Okay, here, let me share these results with you all. So somewhat similar. Entrenched positions were similar, but inability to manage emotions was a big one for our prior participants. Advocates unhelpful to the process was a big one for our prior participants, less so here. And then lack of pre-mediation preparation. So as an this is for in-person, and I think that one of the things that I've learned is with either in-person or online mediation, the pre-mediation preparation has a great deal to do with the success. And much to what Debra just said, one of the things I had not realized until I was doing more online mediation was just how valuable the pre-mediation meetings can be with the parties to start to create that rapport and create that personal touch with them.
So now let's take a look at what does this mean for technique and skill development. And so again, what you see here is that a lot of people that entrenched position. And so that to me tied to lack of pre-mediation preparation, to me totally goes together. We can help shift that entrenched position to a more open mindset for learning perspectives by engaging in the pre-mediation process. But then also advocates unhelpful to the process. And we had this conversation earlier about where, you know, the attorney advocates are oftentimes bringing their courtroom legal skills into the mediation room, entirely different settings. And so that's why it becomes important to take a look at the languaging that we're using. And so that's something that's emerging as an area of education. And then disputes not ready for resolution. And maybe Susan, you can address that more than I can.
Well, I you know, that's one that I have found that comes up for me most often when it is a mediation that's been referred from a court, and the parties are not really at the point where they've done all the, you know, the discovery that was necessary, or where they haven't really put a lot of thought into what needed to be, you know, the thought that they needed to have about what they wanted to accomplish in the mediation. So I have had that be an issue, or it could be just that there's something that still needs to happen, or information that needs to come in before that resolution, you know, before the parties are able to reach a resolution. And that happens often. I was just talking to one of my colleagues in the ABA who does a lot of pro bono mediation for the court system in Sarasota, Florida. And she said about 50% of the cases the court refers to her, she ends up having to, you know, recess for the day and set down for, have them get in touch with the court and reschedule for a date in the future with some idea of what needs to be done. So she feels more like a scheduler, or someone who's like giving them a task to-do list, and then tells them to come back when they're ready.
Yep. Okay. And there was a question that about will we be sharing the poll results? And so the short answer is yes, but maybe Susan, you can talk about some of the future developments there.
Yeah, well, so one of the things that we are doing is we are recently paired with a fellow who of the ABA who happens to be a professor in legal psychology, and Debra, who does polls all the time, and
another Debra.
Another Debra. She's Debra too. We've Debra 1 and Debra 2. She goes by Debbie. And we are going to be reworking the poll with two things in mind. One is there's additional information, having seen the results of this initial poll, that we think we would like to have that would help further our understanding of these measures. But the other thing that we have realized is this is a rapidly changing situation. What you all knew, what we all knew, March, April was very different from May, June, July, August, and now in November. The people's needs, people's understanding of online mediation, where it's going and where just the entire industry is going is different. And we will be putting it together as an additional program for the April conference of the ABA DR section. So we will have these results, but we will have some further results and a deeper dive into the topic, hopefully by next April.
So next to our next poll, what do you feel contributes to the success of online mediation? I think we've certainly been hearing about the advantages of it. So let's hear what you have to say. Easier to regulate emotions with physical separation, ease of communication, visual experience, supportive environment, ease of visually sharing documents, screen, and then again, other. Which,
please feel free. I'd love to. The other is the most fascinating to me because these are, I hear all kinds of benefits. And that's one of the things that I think is really significant out of this poll, and just something for all of us to remember, is we started online mediation, many of us, for a reason. And for most of the people that I talked to, it was COVID. It was social distancing. It was a needed thing during quarantine. But there are a number of reasons why people anecdotally are finding online mediations to be quite successful. In fact, in my practice for 5 years, I've not noticed any lessening of efficacy. In fact, in many ways, I feel that online mediation is more successful. So I do think that I like Jan is mentioning that her other is the comfort factor for the participants, that they are in a comfortable place. That is one of the reasons why I think that, especially in divorce mediation, I think that it can be a more streamlined process because people are much more able to manage their emotions when they're sitting on their couch with their dog, as opposed to sitting in some stranger's office.
And not to mention, not having to drive and through traffic and then finding a parking space and then going into, some downtown office that's very professional, all of that sort of adds and mounts to the psychological experience.
Yeah, and the ease of communication, the fact that it's a visual experience, that is another one that I think we underestimate, because and Debra can certainly speak to this, but we process and are able to think about and make decisions about things in a visual fashion. So if we see a calculation on a screen, or we see the pie chart of how things are being divided up, or are able to visually see something, our participants are much more able to grasp the concept, think about it, and make decisions about it than when we are talking about or just using words to describe things or pushing pieces of paper around at them. So one of the things that we have the ability to do in an online mediation, and you may want to actually do more of in an online mediation, is use more visual aids, use more I do family. So sometimes I have that balance sheet of the marital balance sheet, and we will go through and they can see the pie chart change as we move assets around and things like that. Very powerful tool for the clients.
Okay.
Okay.
So what gets in the way of reaching a resolution online?
Let me just get to that one. Oh, this one. This is the stuff I hear about the most. Inability to assess body language, inability to manage emotions, inability to establish rapport, technical issues. So we've had them in this webinar. They had them in the one before. We had them in our first webinar. That's one of the first golden rules of online mediation. Technical issues are going to happen. Be prepared.
And as you can see, that's consistent with what our other respondents have said in the past too. So we got a long way to go, baby.
Yeah, well, technical issues are always going to happen. I think the key is knowing what you're going to do about them and letting people know ahead of time that when they happen, this is what you should do. You lessen a lot of the anxiety when you go into the mediation and tell people, hey, if this happens, and it might, don't be worried, this is what we'll do.
And I'd like to just put out there, because the responses today, the second highest one is the same as what we've been experiencing in our survey among 90 others. And so your responses today will add greatly to this. But the fact that participants are uncomfortable with the tech format or platform, that's not just the participants, the parties in conflict, that also goes for the legal advocate. I just quite honestly had a horrendous experience about a week ago that's like, oh my gosh, and so I'm changing how I'm doing things already. But again, this is where your pre-mediation of two types actually comes into play. Doing a pre-mediation technical review with your advocates, individually or singly, and then with the advocate with their client, because now they're looking like the smart guy or smart woman, and it might take a little more time, but then you can adjust your pricing to reflect this additional time you're doing up front. But I tell you, it'll make it go so much easier. And again, another way to build rapport and reflect your own expertise in how to do this stuff effectively. Okay. So my plug for pre-mediation. So it helps.
Absolutely. Makes all the difference.
Yep. Yeah. So again, the implications, we got to work through. And so we talked about, well, we know what's going to happen. So don't get flustered. Okay, let's just regroup. And one of the key things I've learned from another mediator is always give your cell phone out so that they can text you if they're having any difficulties. And this also means being in the mediation in terms of if you're in a breakout room, you're not going to know if they've dropped connection and are sitting in the waiting room, for example. So nextly, really important here, because this is going to shape where we see things going in the future. What additional skills are needed to be successful in the virtual world? So new polling question number 11.
Should
More
be up.
practice. Pardon? Okay, yep, it's up.
It is up. I was going to say, so more practice with Zoom or your online platform, more skills in managing emotions online, more skills in communicating effectively online, help with making my process more online friendly, more strategies on how to enhance the online experience, tips on how to minimize Zoom fatigue, because it's real. It's very, sadly, very real. Yeah, okay. Here we go. So I'm going to end the polling here and share the results. So more practice with Zoom and more strategies on how to enhance the online experience for our participants. So that's pretty consistent again. And there is no, whether it's practice with your online platform, one of the problems with practicing in an online platform is you can't do it yourself. You can't move people around. You can't create breakout rooms. You can't do it yourself. So one thing that I've always suggested, especially SCMA is a wonderful organization to be able to do it with, because perhaps one of the PDG meetings that you go to, some time could be spent. It honestly doesn't take a lot of time, but you've got a built-in group of people. You can go around the room and let people practice breaking out the rooms.
Okay, so the next thing is that, do you plan to continue your services online, or do you plan to go back in person? So our next question. Yes, you plan to continue. I plan to go only in person. I'm going to plan to do both, or maybe other. I know I told Susan, I don't think you're going to get me back into a live mediation again. I sort of like my new local setup.
Yeah, well, when I moved from California to Chicago, I chose not to even open a land office. So none of COVID was a surprise for me or a difficulty for me. What I do find interesting in both of the polls is no one plans to go back to only in person. We didn't get a single person who said that or that they plan to retire. I'm glad we're all staying with it. But definitely most people are planning on offering both. I think that's the best of both worlds. Why would we not want to offer our clients more than one option?
And why are we emphasizing this? And, we bring them back to standard 6 of the ethical guidelines. This is something that was created with AAA, the ABA, and Association for Conflict Resolution, ACR. And I was active with ACR at the time. So I remember this coming back and spending a lot of time, well, what does this mean? Well, we didn't have online back then, or at least ODR did, but most of us didn't. But there is a duty, an obligation to continue to, advance our knowledge and skills using the technology available. And so if you think you don't need to learn this, well, I think you're wrong. So lastly, what are the benefits of offering services online? And we have a polling question for that. And it's convenience, minimize travel, comfort for clients and practitioners, efficiency, accessible to more diverse range of clients, like I mentioned, less emotional intensity, safety, ease of access, and other.
Convenience is definitely the one I always see people noting. It's hard to minimize the convenience, certainly one of it. But that less emotional intensity, I'm not seeing all of the above. I love you, Jan. she's an adopter. That's wonderful. Well, here, let's see the results here. So convenience was our number one here, which I think, it's the whole reason the entire world has moved online. But minimize travel, efficiency, more accessible to a diverse range of clients. We've actually touched on most of those throughout this presentation, and less emotional intensity. And Debra, you are again the person who taught me that when two people in conflict see each other but are not physically in the same room, they are actually able to maintain a lesser level of the stress hormones. Your brain isn't releasing the same level of cortisol and other stress hormones.
Yeah, better emotional regulation. Yep. Okay, so we only have, I think, one question left, and we've already discussed a lot of those things. Obviously, there are many implications for online services. And we just lastly want to know, because this ties into a local ABA chapter questionnaire about the representation of males versus females. So who's with us today? Who's answering our poll?
Here we go. And I'm going to let you talk about the significance here, because I asked Debra, why do we want to know this? And Debra had a wonderful answer. So I'm going to let her answer it.
Yeah, well, again, I was triggered, just working with our, local ABA chapter, chapter here, and they did a poll this summer wondering how many males versus females are out there. And I'll have to tell you, when I started back in the 90s, and into the 2000s, white middle-aged females were actually the predominant of the mediators I saw, and at the national level. I went to ACR for many years, and certainly there were males, but it seems that as the legal market has gotten more into that, the male mediator is definitely more dominant in the mediation world than what it used to be. So we're seeing some evolution there, and so but yet we're seeing a higher percentage of females responding to our questionnaires. So go figure. And on that, I'll just move forward. We actually, unfortunately, we've had a lot of interaction today, and we're not going to have time for a Q&A, and I know that our time is upon us, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Lucia.
Hey. Thank you so much to Debra and Susan providing this particular workshop, because I know it's of extra interest to most of us who are mediating and trying to move forward mediating in the 21st century. I also appreciate both of you allowing participants to send in meetings via chat. I just got some technical difficulty.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what happened. Well, I'll keep talking. The main thing I want to share with the group is, first of all, thank you for being here. And for those of you who are interested in becoming a member of SCMA, because the panelists and myself do belong to the organization, please visit our website at scmediation.org. And for those of you who have let your mediation membership lapse, please come back, we miss you, and sign up that same way through our website. Thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you enjoyed our conference of SCMA 2020.
Yay, SCMA. Thank you. We will be sending the slide deck and the chat and all to SCMA so that they'll be able to post them. So you will be able to get them.
And one thing,
Perfect.
Jan Sauer said, oh, and remember, today is historic, our first female vice president. Woohoo!
Yay! Go, Susan.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.